Li Fei discusses political reform framework with the local legal sector. A bomb plot targeting Chinese interests in the Philippines. And celebrities fall victim to hackers.
Good evening. Senior Beijing officials spent the last day of their visit to Hong Kong discussing the political reform framework recently unveiled in Beijing with the local legal sector, among others. Meanwhile, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying questioned what the Pan-Democrats realistically want for the future.
Speaking before today's Executive Council meeting, the Chief Executive said it's time for those who are not happy with the political reform framework to consider what they truly want for the future. This after Li Fei, Deputy Secretary General of the National People's Congress Standing Committee, and other senior Beijing officials explained on several occasions in the city yesterday the rationale behind the framework. The chief executive said he understands that there are people who are not happy with the framework that guides local CE elections starting from 2017, and that some people are really emotional about it. But we have to ask, he added, what comes after passion? After passion, do we want to elect the CE through one person, one vote? He also called on the Pan-Democrats to consider the reality and not just ideals. He said it's better to have universal suffrage despite shortcomings than nothing at all. Today, the Beijing officials wrapped up their visit to the SAR with an action-packed day, meeting with many people, including representatives of the Bar Association and the Law Society.
The question is whether or not there is anything legally that one can do to make the process more democratic. The response that we were given was that there is still a lot that one can do in the next consultation process in relation to domestic legislation. But we did not actually go into details as to what kind of actual concrete steps that can be taken.
Secretary for Justice Rimsky-Yun was also at these meetings. He said the legal sector representatives and Beijing officials had frank exchanges over legal issues surrounding the electoral reform. Yun said it's particularly important because as Hong Kong moves forward to design a new electoral system, there'll be many legal issues that need to be resolved. So it's good that communication is established between the two sides.
To the Philippines now, where authorities say they foiled a major bomb plot yesterday at the international airport in Manila. They arrested 3 men accused of plotting a series of bomb attacks to express their anger against China and Chinese interests. Sonia Artero reports.
It was 1:45 in the morning when counter-terrorism agents swooped down on 3 men in a van parked outside Terminal Number 3 of Nino Aquino International Airport. That's where the suspects were nabbed assembling improvised explosive devices inside this vehicle. After arresting the leader of the group and 2 other men, a firearm and at least 8 bombs capable of causing fatal injuries were confiscated. Authorities called the suspects misguided. So enraged over anti-Chinese grievances, they set out to attack their own home front.
Claim to be defenders of the Filipino people and considers China and quote-unquote oligarch taipans engaged in monopolistic business practices and illegal mining as their enemies.
The Justice Secretary believes the bombs were meant to be an angry message to the Philippine government for being too soft on territorial claims with China, namely the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea.
They want this administration to espouse a tougher stance in its dispute with China.
This is why they plotted to target buildings linked to China. In addition to the Chinese embassy, they also plan to set off 3 bombs inside the SM Mall of Asia in Pasay City. It's owned by Henry Tsai, who was born in China and is now the Philippines' wealthiest man. Another bomb target was the DMCI building. It's owned by ethnic Chinese Filipino David Consunji, known as the 6th richest man in the Philippines. The 3 suspects face charges of conspiracy to commit terrorism. Their group apparently calls itself USA FFE in reference to the U.S. and Philippine formation that fought the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. An investigation is underway to find the rest of the group's members. Sonia Artero, TVB News.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has proposed new laws that would give police the power to seize the passports of Britons who are suspected of having links with terrorist groups. The proposals come just days after Cameron raised the UK's terrorism alert to severe, the second highest level. Alan Booknear reports.
Let me turn to how we address the terrorist threat at home.
David Cameron described the Islamic State militant group battling in northern Iraq and Syria as the biggest security threat of modern times, surpassing even al-Qaeda. He said intelligence services suspect about 500 Britons have gone to fight in Syria and Iraq. This would include an Islamic State militant who spoke with a London accent, involved in the beheading of a U.S. journalist.
It is abhorrent that people who declare their allegiance elsewhere are able to return to the United Kingdom and pose a threat to our national security.
Right now, only Britain's Interior Minister has the power to withhold passports. Cameron said more is needed to ensure police at border crossings can act in time when they spot a suspect.
Mr. Speaker, passports are not an automatic right, so we will introduce specific and targeted legislation to fill this gap by providing the police with a temporary power to seize a passport at the border, during which time they'll be able to investigate the individual concerned.
When asked by an opposition lawmaker if he was open to the idea of joining the United States in direct military action in Iraq, Cameron said he would not rule anything out. Britain has so far just carried out aid drops and surveillance and transported military supplies to Kurdish forces allied with the Baghdad government in the war against Islamic State. Alan Booknear, TVB News.
Meanwhile, the United Nations has agreed to a request by Iraq to send a mission to the country to investigate human rights abuses by the Islamic State extremist group. Iraqi government forces fought alongside Kurdish troops and Shiite militiamen to push back the Islamic State Sunni militants. The town of Amirli has been surrounded by IS fighters for more than 2 months. The summer offensive by the militants stunned the Iraqi military, who withdrew from the territory, leaving the local Kurdish fighters on their own. After the battle, Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki visited the area. He pledged to turn the country into a big grave for the Sunni militants with the Islamic State. Well, negotiations to ease the crisis in Ukraine have been adjourned until Friday, but an offer from pro-Russian separatists seems to reflect Moscow's desire to strike a deal. James Aikenrick explains.
There was no breakthrough in the first meeting between representatives from Russia, Ukraine, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. But there was a development. Pro-Russian separatists, who also have representatives at the talks, made an offer. Rebels said if Kiev guarantees their special status as federal republics, they will do everything possible to preserve Ukraine's economic, cultural, and political unification. That would mean the self-proclaimed republics would remain part of Ukraine. The more moderate tone appears to reflect Russian President Vladimir Putin's desire to make a deal that would allow Russia to avoid more punitive Western sanctions while preserving a significant degree of leverage over its neighbor. But while efforts to reach a compromise continue, so too does the fighting. In Donetsk, residents have been seeking shelter in basements as rebels pushed Ukrainian government forces from an airport outside the city. And on Sunday, missiles fired from near the port of Mariupol sank one of 2 Ukrainian Coast Guard cutters. In Kiev, a visiting U.S. senator said he will urge the White House to provide Ukraine with defensive weapons. Robert Menendez described the conflict as a Russian fight against Europe being fought on Ukrainian territory.
At the end of the day, if you are being invaded by Russia and they are invading you with tanks, with surface-to-surface missiles, with armored vehicles, you have to be able to defend yourself. Defend yourselves being able to fight against those who have invaded you.
A NATO summit in Wales on Thursday is expected to approve the creation of a high readiness force to counter Russia. And a new package of EU sanctions against Russia is expected to be finalized on Wednesday, with a decision on implementation to be made by Friday. James Aiken, TVB News.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said today Japan and India should work together to promote democracy. Speaking at a university in Tokyo, Modi did not name China outright, but alluded to the country, saying Japan and India should let the world know what democracy and democratic values stand for. On Monday, the two countries agreed to strengthen strategic ties. Modi has an intense month of diplomacy ahead. He'll be receiving President Xi Jinping later this month before heading to Washington for a meeting with U.S. President Barack Obama.
In the United States, the FBI is addressing allegations that several celebrities suffered a hacking attack that led to their nude photographs being posted online. As NBC News reports, this hacking breach means anyone taking pictures with their phone could be at risk.
You look great! Jennifer Lawrence is one of the biggest names in Hollywood.
Right here, Jen, right here.
But overnight, the young Oscar winner took center stage for a different reason after dozens of nude and risque photos of the actress appeared on an anonymous online image sharing site. And with them, similar photos reporting to show supermodel Kate Upton, singers Rihanna and Ariana Grande, and more than 100 other famous women in what many call the biggest celebrity hacking ever. It's a scenario like the one shown in the comedy Sex Tape, in which a private video goes viral after getting lost in the cloud.
It went up to the cloud!
And you can't get it down from the cloud?
Nobody understands the cloud.
And what is most alarming to many is how the unidentified hacker claims he got the pictures through the Apple iCloud, which uses servers like these to back up the digital lives of hundreds of millions of people. We caught up with former federal cybercrime prosecutor Mark Rash at a computer security conference today in Sweden.
By storing it on the cloud, it becomes a one-stop shop for hackers. Hackers only have to break in one place to get everybody's data. If the celebrities are vulnerable, it means that everybody is vulnerable on the cloud.
Late today, the FBI said it was aware of the issue and looking into it, while Apple said, we take user privacy very seriously and are actively investigating this report. Publicists for Jennifer Lawrence and Kate Upton all but confirmed the photos, condemning the leaks as flagrant and outrageous violations of privacy. Another reminder that privacy is one click away from public scrutiny. Jacob Rascone, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Although no similar incidents have been reported in Hong Kong so far, experts are warning local users of cloud data services to be careful when storing personal information online.
For instance, they should put up a much stronger password that people are not easy to guess or to break. Then they have to also turn off the auto sync function of the mobile phone. Since this incident, people may be curious about what's happening and what pictures looks like. But we advise people to be very careful when they receive links or attachments of unidentified source, because hackers now will be interested in making use of people's curiosity.
And still to come in the news tonight. The Shek Kwu Chau waste incinerator passes a legal hurdle. Lifeguards planning to go on strike next Tuesday. And no need for passengers on board locally registered planes to switch off their portable electronic devices.